All right, let's jump right in. The book of Revelation. Man, it kicks off with one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, one of the most bizarre images in the entire Bible. We're talking about the vision of the glorified man. It's a passage that's confused people for, like, centuries, right? So today, we're going to decode it, piece by piece, and see what it's really all about. I mean, just listen to this description. His head and his hair were white like wool, his eyes like a flame of fire, his feet like burnished bronze. Wow. It is an intense image, almost alien, you know? This is definitely not the gentle shepherd we're used to from the Gospels. No, this is something else entirely. It's majestic, it's strange, and it's totally unforgettable. So, you gotta ask, what in the world are we looking at here? Is this supposed to be some kind of terrifying monster, or is every single one of these weird details packed with symbolic meaning? Well, that's the mystery we're gonna solve. We are going to break down what this vision actually meant to the people who first heard it. Okay, so before we can even start decoding the figure himself, we've got to understand the setting. Context is everything, right? John tells us he got this vision while he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And let me tell you, when and where this happens, that's our first huge clue to unlocking the whole thing. Now, I know a lot of people hear the Lord's Day and their minds immediately jump to, the end of the world. But that's not what's going on here. The text is actually talking about something much more immediate. The Lord's Day was the term for Sunday, the weekly day of worship for the early church. It's the day they gathered, the day God met with his people. And check this out. This is where it gets really cool. The vision happening on a Sunday, that's not just some random detail. It actually frames the entire book of Revelation as a kind of divine worship service. Think about it like this. The prayers and worship of the church on that day are what kick off all the action in the book. It's wild. Okay, so with that whole worship service idea in our back pocket, let's get to the main event, the man himself. We're going to break down the 7 main parts of this description, and you'll see every single one is a symbol pulled right out of the Old Testament, and each one reveals something absolutely profound. So let's start at the top, the white hair. Now, this isn't just about him being old, not at all. It's a direct callback to the description of God the Father in the book of Daniel, who's called the Ancient of Days. So right away, John knows he's not just seeing some angel or prophet, he's seeing someone who has the wisdom and the authority of God himself. And then, the eyes. Eyes like a flame of fire. Whew! This isn't just about seeing things, It's about seeing through things. It's a symbol of this perfect, piercing insight that sees everything for what it truly is, and judges it. If you're on his side, that gaze is a comfort. If you're not, it's terrifying. Absolutely nothing can be hidden. Okay, but what about the feet of bronze, glowing like they've been in a furnace? Well, this points us straight back to the tabernacle in the Old Testament. The huge altar where sacrifices were made, that was bronze. It was a place of fire and judgment. So this tells us that his very foundation, the ground he stands on, is built on holiness and righteous judgment. And his voice, it's described as being like the sound of many waters, like a roaring waterfall. Man, this symbol has so many layers. In the book of Ezekiel, that's the sound of God's own glory. It's also this idea of a cleansing, life-giving river. But here's the beautiful part. Revelation later says the voice of God's people sounds the same way. So in a way, his voice actually contains the voices of all the faithful. All right, so we've looked at his body, but what about what he's wearing? The text says he has on a long robe with a golden sash tied across his chest. And believe it or not, the way he's wearing that sash is another huge clue. A critical piece of the puzzle that tells us exactly who he is now. So get this. In the Old Testament, when a priest was working at the altar, he'd tie his sash around his waist, kind of like hitching up his robe to get to work. But this figure, his sash is worn high, across his chest. That's not the posture of someone who's working. That's the posture of a king at rest, someone whose work is finished. So that one little detail about the sash reveals everything. He is the high priest, but his big job, the sacrifice on the cross, it's done. It's finished. And because that work is done, he is now the king who has sat down, entered his rest, and started his reign. He's a priest king, ruling from this place of completed victory. But there's even more going on here. This image of a priest king with all these metallic features, it isn't random. It's actually a direct answer to another super famous vision from the Old Testament. This shining figure is the fulfillment of the metal man prophecy from the book of Daniel. You probably remember this story from Daniel chapter 2, right? King Nebuchadnezzar has this dream about a giant statue. It has a head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron. That statue, that first metal man, it stood for a whole sequence of powerful earthly empires. And we're talking about the superpowers of the ancient world: Babylon, then Persia, then Greece, and finally Rome. These empires were like the great stage where the story of God's people took place. They represented the old way of doing things, the constant rise and fall of human kingdoms. And here comes the punchline. The vision in Revelation shows us that Jesus is the true metal man. His glorious, shining, metallic form is basically a declaration that he has completely replaced that entire old world order of empires. He is the new eternal kingdom, all in one person. But we can go even one level deeper. Think about this. The first man, Adam, was made from light, fragile dust. But the last Adam, Jesus, is revealed as this heavy, solid, glorious metal. It's fascinating because in Hebrew, the word for glory, kavod, literally means heavy or weighty. He is the substantial, glorious reality that replaces our fragile, dusty beginnings. So, okay, we've decoded all these incredible symbols, but what's the big takeaway? Why this vision, right at the beginning of the book? What's the point of showing us this glorified man? Well, the core message is this: Jesus is revealed as the ultimate standard. He's the measuring stick. His character, everything we just unpacked in that 7-part description, that's the standard that the 7 churches are about to be measured against. And really, it's the standard the entire world will be measured against. And it's not just a random list of features either. Check out this beautiful literary pattern. It's called a chiasm. It's perfectly symmetrical. It starts with his head and ends with his face. Then it moves inward to his eyes for evaluation, and that's balanced by his mouth for judgment. And what's right there in the center, at the very heart of the vision, his voice. This whole structure is basically an outline for the entire book of Revelation. It all flows from who he is. So even though the imagery is super intense, the goal wasn't to scare the early Christians. Far from it. It was meant to be a huge comfort. It showed them that their Lord wasn't some dead martyr. He was a living, reigning priest-king who was right there with them, giving them a clear identity and a perfect standard to hold on to in a really chaotic world. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on, doesn't it? If this incredible vision of the glorified man is the eternal standard, the perfect measure for everything, well, it makes you wonder, what's being measured by that standard today? In our world, in our churches, and maybe even in our own lives.